I'm so happy to have you here. It's been a journey for me. 10 years ago, when I last saw you live in Australia, and I did the Journey intensive program myself, and I got some tools that I had no idea was available, and then went on and actually did the Journey, the advanced program as well. And it was really interesting because that year, after doing that work, and it was probably some of the deepest work I'd ever done on myself, just after the GFC as well, where the GFC was a extraordinary wake-up call for my ego, and I really was like a puppy dog with its tail between its legs, really being smacked on the nose hard, and I had a lot of stuff I was holding around that, a lot of shame that I had, that I'd lost all this wealth that I thought I had. I'd closed down all these businesses, all these people that I've been working with, and I was hugely disappointed in myself. And really, as we are, we get really hard on ourselves. And I came over from Perth and I moved to the Gold Coast, and I started working with a beautiful group that was all connected with Katrina and Roy, and I got introduced to the journey work. And I remember doing this, the first few processes, and going into stuff that I had never, ever spoken about, and never felt comfortable speaking about, and finding such resolution and such gratitude and release of that burden that I'd been carrying with me. And the extraordinary thing was, within months, I'd changed my entire life, my entire lifestyle. I'd sold up whatever I had left, and I had a backpack, and I boarded a plane, and I went and moved to Bali. And that's 10 years in the making. So hugely grateful for being able to do that work with you. And what's happened since then is, then in the last 3 years, we had the beautiful opportunity to work with the journey work itself, and actually support people actually joining, being practitioners, and coming through, and actually seeing the opportunity to actually be a journey practitioner, and actually build a business, and actually make this part of their life, like a purposeful business that you can now do with the extraordinary tools and programs that you deliver. And so yeah, just so grateful to have you here, and to represent this and take this out to our networks, and have more people being able to really tune into this amazing work that you do. I know that it's been translated in the book that you've written, the journey that you've written is 24 different languages, and you're in 39 odd countries. I know that when we were trying to ever get hold of you, you're always on the move, like what time zone is you next. So it's really beautiful that we get to now make this available so much easier and simpler to so many more people, given the shift and changes that you've made in the journey. And maybe you can start just as a quick little intro on what that shift has been for the journey, and how that's now available for everybody. Because the intention of this is to introduce people to this extraordinary work, and then show them an extraordinary. We've got a beautiful opportunity for people to actually come in and actually do this work now through the new mechanisms that you put together.
Well, I have to say, as you know, I was traveling around the world 44 out of 53 weeks in the year, giving the live seminars for the last 26 years. And so when the lockdown happened and we ended up here in Greece, I'd come from Australia, gone through India to give one of my advanced courses, and then landed here in March 14th. And lockdown happened, and I realized the whole world was in fear. And even though we'd been live streaming all kinds of small courses and seminars and, just interviews, whatever, since 2011, since the very first live stream ever came out, we have been doing that. One of the programs that I felt that I needed to hold as a live in-person with Brandon program was the Journey Intensive. And it's because, first of all, as you know from having expressed it just now, it's the very deep work where you roll up your sleeves and you dive in and you get to core issues and you clear them absolutely. And you do come to this place of relief and release and joy and freedom. And you come home to a sense of being at home in your own skin. And so it was highly, highly interactive. And so for 26 years, I've given the Journey Intensive, but always what made it sort of the signature program is that we always had huge practitioner and trainer support. And even though I was willing to give other teachings out online, I felt the thing that makes the journey is that I feel that doing a journey is not a band-aid. It's not like you do one process and you're fixed for life. It's an ongoing journey in your life. And for that, you need the support of people who have undergone the work. And so I didn't think it was possible really to offer the journey as an online event. But what happened as soon as I got here, we immediately started, and in the last 3 months, I've offered over 60 videos online free of charge. And please get on my Facebook page and get onto them, and all kinds of meditations, process work, even I've offered food to eat that stimulates your immune system, and movement work and yoga and getting to your worst fears. And just because we were at a crisis point, this unprecedented time when people, all their worst fears were being driven to the surface, and we were all of us in lockdown, literally trapped. And none of us were given a manual. How do you deal with living in this uncertain, our jobs falling away, our fear for our loved ones? And so it's like we've been all together as a humanity in a melting pot. And I was doing everything I could to just give the work away and to say, share it with your friends. And you can still get that. You can become part of the Journey community and get over those 60 videos. And I gave a 21-day meditation series. But I became aware it wasn't enough. That if people were going to come out of this lockdown period from a place of clarity and with purpose and direction, and know, like you did, where your whole life changed and you found a whole new purpose and direction, John. And so if we were going to move from this time of uncertainty, we were going to have to roll up our sleeves and dive in and really meet our deepest issues that we had not addressed, that we were not even aware of. And so I was stretched beyond all my beliefs of the last 26 years, because I thought, how can I make this a program that everyone can undergo in their homes as if they're in a live seminar with me, and also being supported with that individual support from the trainers? Because when I teach, it's not just giving you teachings. You are literally, as soon as a teaching goes out, you are going into a process with someone. And so we found this amazing platform called Mighty Network, where it allowed people to go into rooms where they are supported. We had over 70 trainers and practitioners at this first ever online Journey Intensive, which was a blow-away event this last weekend in Europe. And people were in tears of gratitude, and they'd go into a room, and let's say they were doing a process with someone online, like on a Zoom, like we're doing now, but actually doing a process. And, oh no, what should we do now? And they'd raise their hand, and in that room immediately, the practitioner would come and support them, carry them through the process. And if there was someone whose process wasn't as wonderful and liberating and freeing as they wanted, immediately they'd get a reprocess with a practitioner. And so they were able to have this most amazing support, which has become the hallmark of journey work, that we are a journey community where we support each other in liberating our lives and coming to a place of wholeness and freedom. And so I was so moved and blown out of the water by it, and the reports that we've gotten back from it of how people are, talking like you're talking, John, where you feel like you were washed clean and you so much gratitude and freedom. And, it's not my prayer, John, that people just get have the experience of this massive in-depth retreat. And that's the end of it. Is my prayer that they get the experience of this powerful, liberating and healing work, and that they then take these tools and use them in their life with their children, their parents, their families, their friends, so that we can, all of us, take the lampshade off the light. So it's been a time of real stretch for me and opening to how can we create this same powerful, interactive time where people were saying it was like sitting in the front row at a Journey intensive, except they were sitting in their living rooms and they were getting this big transmission, this presence and experience. And it went so far better than we could possibly have wished for, John. So I'm so thrilled that it's going to be happening. It's been a revelation for me, and I have been so proud of the result, because I had a lot of concern about it, even though I'd done so many television shows and radio shows and online stuff, which is live, to know that this work could be experienced at this depth as an online program, it just burst my heart wide open. And so I'm just so grateful. And it feels to me, John, that all of life is conspired. We've been in lockdown, and one of the things that happens with our emotions, and what science says, is that when you feel a strong emotion and you repress it, what it does is it releases a quantifiable biochemistry into your bloodstream, which will go to certain cell receptors and block them, rendering those cells incapable of communicating with the rest of the cells in the body. And if over time illness happens, of course, it happens where the cells are blocked. And what's conversely also known to be true is that when we feel our emotions very openly and freely and naturally, like a child does, our cell receptors remain open. And so, as you know, the journey was first born from my own direct experience in 1992 of healing from a basketball-sized tumor. And part of the gift of that healing was I found a means for all of us to go on our own journey experiences, our own journey process, and literally go on a journey inside your body to get to these blocked cells, to go through a process of release and understanding and forgiveness, so that the body and the being could heal, so that when new cells are born, they're born devoid of that old consciousness. And so what has happened here with this huge crisis that happened, we've been in lockdown and we're getting triggered big time. And it's like as if life is pushing our buttons, and tempers are flying and frustrations are here. And it's not that those frustrations and tempers and fear and anxiety and stress wasn't there before. What happened is that it's already inside your cells, and life is triggering up. And yet none of us was given a manual. How do you deal with that? And so now, more than any other time in history, it's a prayer that I have that everyone get access to these tools, that you go on your journey to clear whatever is causing this surface fear and this surface stress. I mean, you could be in Sydney and stuck in traffic, and someone cuts you off, and out of nowhere, up comes rage. Well, that person who cut you off, they didn't come in the middle of the night and stick the rage there. That rage was already there, and all that happened was your buttons were being pushed, and it came up. And so it was triggered, and suddenly, vroom, up comes the rage. And that's the way it is in life. And the journey gives you the means to get access to these deeper, more buried, emotionally stored and buried issues, and in a very real, in very practical, down to earth, and actually gentle way, go through a deep process of release and letting go and coming to an understanding, as you did, John. And ultimately, you go through a deep process of forgiveness where you forgive yourself, you forgive life, you forgive God, each other. And then when the new cells are born, they are born as new regenerative cells. And so this work obviously is being used by the medical field and in hospitals and by psychiatrists and by people from all walks of life. And so it's almost like life is made a call to action, I feel, to all of us just to get real and to clear and face what we're here to finally clear and face in this life. All the karma that we're meant to clear and face, and what we're meant to learn from what's taken place in our life. So anyway, that's a sort of a brief introduction to what's happening right now as we're all going through these very uncertain times.
Wow, thank you for sharing, Brandon. That's a beautiful explanation that I think that all of us had, like in the last few months that we were coming through in this uncertainty and all these new, feelings and emotions and thoughts and all sorts of things that comes up. And it really made me, and I remember as you were speaking that in 2008, it was such an important moment when I really felt the potential that what online technologies can bring to the planet and how we can connect as human beings, and across the screen. And I remember that was kind of like a fleeting insight and something that really deeply touched me, but I had no idea when or how it would come into being. As you were speaking now, I was just transported back to that moment, and I was like, wow, this is it. That's what you were explaining, the power of connecting together with other people and actually bringing this healing work through to humanity in these really disturbing and challenging times. I was just like, wow, I just really felt that that this is it, and this is the work that the journey is doing so beautifully. And the fact that you could move the whole journey intensive online and to be able to make it available on the different time zones, I really feel it's a beautiful opportunity for everyone to be dropping in their own time and place. When we come to that moment, we know that this is the work that we actually need, and there is something that a block, some kind of uncertainty, maybe an illness, something that we need to move or shift through. And it's beautiful, the process. I would love that if you can share a little bit more about the depth of the journey and how you actually bring people on this journey. And for someone who maybe haven't experienced it at yet, just give us a little bit of a glimpse, what does it feel like, what does it mean, and how would you, imagine?
Well, can I explain a little bit of the science about why it is the journey so effective in not only healing emotionally, but physically? I mean, originally, over 26 years ago, when I first started doing the journey, it became very famous for working with everything having to do with physical illness, and it would help people to go on their own healing journey and to help heal all kinds of physical illnesses, from Crohn's disease to arthritis, eczema, heart disease, brain tumors, and every imaginable thing that you can imagine. And so it became famous for working with people on a physical level. And because of it being about the field of cellular healing. And I wanted to share just a little bit about the field of cellular healing and the effect that the emotions have on your cells, and how it is this programming gets passed on from one cell generation to the next. And way back in 1992, when I first got diagnosed with this basketball-sized tumor, there was a lot of research going on into this field of cellular healing. And I just wanted to share what we know and what science knows about the cells inside your body is that they all replicate at varying speeds. So for instance, if ever you've had a suntan, you'll notice it fades in about 3 weeks' time. And that's because the old cells slough off and are replaced by new regenerative cells. The liver cells take 6 weeks. The stomach lining takes 3 days, or even less than 3 days, for an all-new stomach lining. And the one that just blows my mind are the eye cells, because when you touch your eyes, they feel firm, don't they? In less than 48 hours, in less than 2 days, you will have an all-new inner eyeball. As a matter of fact, there will not be a single molecule in your body a year from now that was here today. You are literally all new. And at the time that I was undergoing the whole, the getting this outrageous and life-threatening, prognosis, there was this research going on in the field of cellular healing. And Dr. Deepak Chopra, who at that time, it wasn't the guru he's become today. At that time, he was a chief surgeon general who worked in a hospital in Boston. He did a radical thing. He decided he would study and create a huge mass of case studies of people who had healed without drugs or surgery. He wanted to find out what makes them heal, what causes cellular healing in them. And the reason that was so radical at that time was that because all of us, whether you were in the complementary medical field like I was, or in the orthodox medical field, we were all trained the same way. Look at the symptoms that lead to ill health, that lead to death. So we were all trained what causes people to die. That's where our focus was. But Chopra says we know enough about what causes people to die. I want to know what causes them to heal. And he amassed at that point hundreds and ultimately thousands of case studies. And what he found with people who had healed without drugs or surgery is that he could only find that they had 2 qualities in common. One was that through some act of grace or spontaneous event, they actually got access to this that he called the infinite intelligence, the part of you that makes your heart beat and your eyes shine and your hair grow, this vast field of presence that's pervading all of existence. The second quality that they had in common was that through some act of grace, they spontaneously got access to the consciousness and the cell memory that was stored inside the cells. And if they somehow were guided by this infinite intelligence inside the body to that cellular location and somehow release the cell memory there, the stored pain, somehow when the new cells were born, they were born devoid of that old consciousness and as new regenerative cells. And Chopra asked a question at the time, well, why is it when you look at a liver that's riddled with cancer in January, and we know it takes 6 weeks for the liver to be completely all new cells, why would that same liver be riddled with cancer in June? Good question to ask. And what he postulated at that time, which has only subsequently been verified by scientists all around the world, is stored inside the degenerative cells are these old repressed cell memories. And before that cell dies, it passes on its programming and consciousness to the next cell generation. So the next cell generation is born as an exact replica of the previous cell generation. And this consciousness this programming gets passed on from one cell generation to the next. And what those people had in common who healed without drugs or surgeries is somehow they got access to that cell memory. And when they cleared it, when the new cell was born, it was born devoid of that old consciousness as a new regenerative cell. Now, at the time that this happened, I knew that. As a matter of fact, when I went to see the oncologist, and I went through the whole exam and all the scans and everything, she said to me, you know what, this probably started as 1 cell when you were 8 years old, and it duplicated. But in the last months before I got to the doctor, those cells started replicating exponentially and aggressively. And, by the time I got to her, it was already the size of a basketball, that tumor. And somehow I knew that my journey in healing would somehow lay in uncovering a means, a method to get access to what's stored inside your cells, and in a very real and direct and practical way, somehow go through a process of release and letting go, and coming to some sort of freeing myself. And I also knew that part of my healing journey would lay in getting access to this thing that Chopra called was the infinite intelligence. This that I now call Source. It's a vast, boundless presence of peace, of stillness, of awareness. It's a vast, boundless presence of healing potential that is your own soul. And so my journey in that 6.5 weeks time of healing from that tumor and being textbook perfect clean is, from that was born the journey process, the journey method. And it allows you in a very real way to go on your own journey inside your body, get access to these old buried issues, and go through radical and very cleansing and gentle but very profoundly healing process, so that when new cells are born, they're born devoid of that old consciousness. And of course, Estella, my prayer is that people give themselves their wake-up call before it ends up as illness, that they clear these issues so that their bodies can be in a place of such healing and wholeness. I can remember one of the things, we have a program called Journey Outreach, which is our international humanitarian organization. And when 9/11 happened in New York City, I happen to be from New York City, and 5,000 people's lives were lost in the Twin Towers. And the American public, American government did a radical thing. They decided they would follow and keep tabs on those people, those families who lost their loved ones in the Twin Tower incidents. Now, of course, when I heard, and it was all over the news, 3 weeks later, 25 of us descended on New York City, and we offered the Journey Intensive free of charge to anyone who had lost their loved ones in the Twin Towers incident, because we knew I didn't want to happen what happens with so many of us, that when you feel the strong emotion, and no one was given a manual, how do you deal with your loved one dying in the Twin Towers going down, right? How do you deal with that? And so what did they do? They shut down. And of course the biochemistry is released. Of course it goes to our blood, our cell receptors. And of course those cells remain blocked unless we go through some process of clearing. It's going to be passing that cell memory from one generation to the next. Now, we only managed to get to 250 people that were there. But all those 250 people have kept in touch with me and said they're so grateful because they didn't end up with illness. But guess what? The US government published the results of the survivors, of the families who lost their loved ones. 10 years later, on September 11, 2011, they published the results, and the survivors had off the Richter scale cancer. I mean, way beyond the norm. Why? Because no one knew how to deal with this, and they went into that shutdown, and the biochemistry was released. And so the journey allows people to get access to what's stored inside there, to come to that place of liberation and wholeness and peace and well-being, and to really clear your emotional issues so they don't have to manifest as illness down the line. And so, these days I'm working with, there's 2 hospitals in Tel Aviv. After you've had, and I work with oncologists, I work with heart disease doctors, and with doctors all over the world. As a matter of fact, when I first got to Britain, I would be invited to cancer centers, and people would be undergoing chemotherapy, you know, which is intravenous, you know, and they'd be undergoing a journey process with a nurse, reading that to them so they could get to the emotional corollary of what co-created the illness. And there are 2 hospitals in Tel Aviv right now where after you've had all your cancer treatment, you then go through a week long of what they call the recovery center, where the main fulcrum of that program is people really undergoing the full journey work and to get to the emotional root cause of what is co-creating the illness. Same with the heart center. In a second hospital, they have that recovery center so that they can get to the emotional corollary of the physical illness, so they can participate in their own healing, because it's a prayer that it doesn't show up again further down the line, because we haven't learned what it was we were meant to learn from this. Because I feel all these wake-up calls are simply that, a wake-up call. Now, the truth of the matter is, our whole world has gotten this massive wake-up call that we've been in for months, and our most primal fears are being triggered. Our fear for our livelihood, our fear for what's life going to be, am I ever going to go back to normal? Our fear for my health. Am I even safe to leave the house? Are other people going to put on their masks? And our most primal fears are being triggered, but how is the world responding to it? We're all of us just going into shutdown. None of us had the manual, which is because of my knowledge of what that is doing to your cells and to humanity's well-being. This is why it stretched me beyond this, any place I could be stretched, to find a way to offer the Journey Intensive. So people could get this work before they manifested as disease down the line, like those in New York City. And, you know, you were asking, how does it feel? And I can remember I was in Israel, and I had been approached by the Ministry of Education, and they'd heard about all the work that we'd done in South Africa. And there's a whole documentary on that, of using the journey in schools. And they found the children that got journey work were averaging 92 to 93% pass rate, where those that were not getting journey work were averaging 67% pass rate on their exams. And so it's not that the journey made the kids smarter, but when you clear whatever blocks you, whatever holds you back, whatever shutdowns are here, then it's natural that you can get access to your own natural shining potential, your own intelligence, your own wisdom. And so I was invited by the Ministry of Education, and they did something very different than South Africa. They said, you know what? We do not want to give this process to our children unless we in the government have experienced it, which I thought was quite enlightened. And so if you could imagine, the entire Ministry for Education underwent the journey for a whole year long. And at the end of it, I was invited into the governmental building in Tel Aviv. And there were 40 of the, you know, the head of the finances department, the head of all the principals, the head of the counselors, the head of grade schools, the head of high schools, you know, they were all there, you know, in a big circle. And the minister, she said, you know what, I don't want you to speak yet. I just want you to hear other people's experience. And one woman said she had had breast cancer, and without drugs or surgery, she had healed in that year. And another woman was sharing she had been through a very acrimonious divorce. And even though it was very painful because of the journey that she was doing on a regular basis, she came through in a place of feeling at peace with herself and with her family, and you know, at peace with the world, really. But the one who touched me, because I think all of you can relate to this, I've been hearing one of the videos that I've been providing recently is how to work with your children and how to parent during this whole COVID lockdown period. And one woman was saying, well, I didn't have any physical illness, and neither did I have a life crisis like an acrimonious divorce. But she said, Brandon, I had an emotional issue where I felt so much anger. And it seemed like I was angry and stressed out 24/7. And she said, I've been coming to the Ministry of Education halls here for the last 18 years. And I have 8 children. And I have just gotten so stressed out and so angry, I wouldn't even look people in the eye anymore. I wouldn't even shalom in the morning and greet them. And all I do is get to committee meetings, and all I do is argue in the committee meetings. And so we'd make another appointment so we could make another committee meeting so I could argue some more. And I would go shopping after I got home from work and pick up some food and make the dinner for my 8 kids and my husband. And every time I made dinner, all of the kids were late for dinner and it went cold, and I would find myself shouting at my kids through the whole meal. And I'd just come to hate myself, and I'd come to hate my life. And she said, the first day I did my journey process, I got to the emotional root cause of what was creating that constant surface anger. And she said, I cleared it out at the deepest level. And that day I got home and went to the grocery store, made this big dinner for everybody. And for the 10 of us. And she said, of course, my children were late again. And she thought, who cares if they're late? The food's still nourishing food, whether it's warm, whether it's cold. And I've been blessed by 8 beautiful children and healthy children. And she said that her 8-year-old, when she got done with dinner, her youngest came to her and said to her, Mommy, where did all the anger go? And the next day she went into the Ministry for Education and she started looking people in the eyes and shaloming to them. And as she looked them in the eyes, she saw the same sparkle in their eyes that she felt inside herself. That same light, that same love. And she said she went into the committee meeting and they got more done in that committee meeting than they had gotten done in the last 10 committee meetings. And the reason, I'm sharing this is because, you asked, what will people feel? And what's an experience of it? Yes, the journey originally became famous for all the physical healing. But today, these days, here we are 26 years on, and it's not just about physical healing. It's about emotional healing and feeling at home in your own skin, coming to a place of peace and wholeness with the issues you have inside you, and having a set of tools that you can use in your life and that you can ongoingly help you get to the emotional root cause of what is causing our surface stress. And so, you asked also for some other experience. I can remember we were there in Auckland, and there was a girl there I shouldn't call her a girl, a young woman, 17 years old. And the year before, she had been diagnosed with 3 inoperable brain tumors. And they'd been told that there was nothing more that medical science could do for them, and that within a year she would die. That was a year before. And her mother, as you can imagine, was frantic, out of her mind. I mean, how do you live with that kind of devastating news that your beautiful young woman, your daughter, is going to die in the next year? Someone dropped the Journey book into her lap. She read it. She handed it to her 17-year-old, and she said, and the daughter said, after she read the book, you know what? I'm going to be just like Brandon. Now, I always, in the 6 books that I've written, I put my process work at the back of the book. And they didn't even know that I was coming to New Zealand, to Auckland, during that time period every year. And so they just innocently, very innocently thought, what have I got to lose? I'm going to do the journey. And so every week, the mother read the journey process without any training or anything to her daughter. A year later, she had her MRI scans, and there was no evidence of there having been any tumors there. And she was pronounced medically cured. But when she came to found out I was in Auckland, of course she wanted to come see me. And she was radiant and looking totally free and at home with herself. But her mother was an emotional wreck. And it's interesting because we invited the 17 years old to participate as part of our trainer team to support those who were going through the journey intensive. And instead we put the mother with a trainer for the whole weekend because we knew what was going on with the mother. She would have been in this place of devastation, a place of fear for her daughter's life, terrified, not able to cope with it. Of course, she would have buried that, pretended she wasn't feeling that way to present a brave front to her daughter. And all of that would have gotten stored inside her cells. And so we stayed with her as they did during the journey intensive that we just did online, and really welcomed her to go deeply and clear all that stored pain so that it would not show up later on down the line as illness. And it's interestingly here we are much later on down the line, 12 years later. And the daughter has become a journey practitioner, and the mother has stayed healthy ever since. And so it's just a testament that I feel that the times that we're living in right now is an invitation for all of us to get real, to crack through whatever this lid of shutdown is that's blanketing us, and to go deeply inside and find this that makes your heart beat and your eyes shine and your hair grow. This vast field of awareness, of presence, of love, that is the divine potential that is your own soul. And it's at the deepest level, at the level of the soul, that you will undergo the journey work. And what I've always learned over the years with working with so many professionals as well as people from all walks of life, that everyone, no matter what our age is capable of going down through the emotional layers into the deepest part of our being, into this vast, boundless presence of our own soul. And everyone is capable of undergoing the journey and clearing whatever stored inside their body and understanding and releasing. And everyone's capable of getting their life lessons, their karmic lessons. And everyone's capable of forgiving. And so that when new cells are born, they're born devoid of that old consciousness, that old programming as new regenerative cells. So it's an amazing time that we live in. And if ever there were a wake-up call for humanity to roll up your sleeves and really do the work, not just the 1-hour videos that I've been doing all over the web, but to really dive in with the support that you need, this is the time. And so, yes, I mean, I could go on and on. I could tell you, I mean, we've worked with hundreds of thousands of people, as you can imagine, and the journey book, became a bestseller around the world, mega bestseller. So around the world, we've been working with hundreds of thousands of people. And what I love about the work is it's living work. It's not born from some formula out there. It's born from direct living experience. And I've seen what works, and I've also seen what doesn't work. And so the work has evolved and gotten more user-friendly, more elegant, and it's work that you can feel free to undergo in yourself and with your loved ones and feel safe and mainly come home. Mm. I don't know if there's anything better than feeling at home in your own skin and feeling at rights with yourself and with the world, and then feeling guided by that truth within to take natural, clear, and appropriate action in your life from a place of connectedness to yourself and to all of humanity. One of the things that the journey does do is it opens you into this infinite intelligence where you feel yourself as part of the fabric of all that is. And that connection, it doesn't go away. It stays with you. That you will just dive in and fall in love with who you are. So I thank you with all my heart, John and Estella.
So thank you again, Brandon.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. And a heartfelt namaste to everyone.